And we are watching the Supreme Court at this hour where several major decisions could be announced in just a matter of moments. We're waiting for justices to hand down decisions on the constitutionality of the same-sex marriage ban, of course known as Prop 8, the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, and whether or not a section of the 1965 Voting Rights Act is outdated. Also, whether race should be a factor in college admissions. My colleague Chris Matthews is going to anchor our coverage at the top of the hour as we wait for an announcement on those decisions. We do not expect a formal statement from the president if one of those landmark decisions comes down, but he could get a question from the press corps at one of his upcoming events. We'll keep you posted on that as it takes place. We want to bring in our Monday gaggle right now, deputy editor of the Rothenberg Political Report and contributing writer for Roll Call, Nathan Gonzalez. Nice to see you, Nathan. Editorial writer for the Washington Post, Ruth Marcus, in person finally rather than over the phone. And Washington, D.C. editor for the National Review and a CNBC contributor is Robert Costa. Robert, good to visit with you as well. I'll start with you very quickly if I can. The G8s are not traditionally known for being the most productive summits. So what do we expect we leave with at the end of this short trip?
I think the president's going to have to make some more statements perhaps on Syria, but it's really going to be an assertion of his second-term foreign policy. Where is he going to take the country in his second term? What are the key strategic areas he's looking around the world?
And if I can, Ruth, give us a sense that, frankly, over the next several weeks with a trip to Africa as well, which I think your own newspaper acknowledged ain't going to be a cheap trip, $60 to $100 million.
They never are.
Right? Yeah, but other presidents have done this. Other presidents have even taken safaris. With so many things on the president's plate, what challenges does it pose that he's going to be overseas for so much of this month right now? Is that timing bad?
I think it's, the timing is never good for a foreign trip in the sense that there's always something bubbling back home. I think the challenge for the White House on this trip, because it's two back-to-back, is to also keep its eye on the immigration ball back home, because from my point of view, the test of success of the president's second term will be whether or not he gets comprehensive immigration reform passed. And yes, White Houses can juggle a bunch of balls, but it's kind of the moment where you might want the president to be around making phone calls.
Well, so Nathan, on that topic of immigration right now, give us a sense. I mean, obviously the Senate side's hoping to have this thing wrapped up by the 4th of July. Okay, the House, as we heard in the conversation with Representative Diaz-Balart a short time ago, has got its own issues right now. Where do you expect this will go, particularly on the House side? Is it dependent on what happens in the Senate?
Well, I think there is moving pieces, and there is the Senate part with how many votes it actually gets. But with the story today with David Drucker about if the Speaker isn't willing to bring a bill to the floor, if he's only willing to do it if there's a majority of his caucus, I think that's a big deal, because I think that's a much higher hurdle, and I think that there was a lot of expectations that he would be willing to bring it to the floor without a majority of his caucus, and so I think it's very tough.
I think a lot probably depends on exactly how many votes they get in the Senate. As we were talking about, 60 versus 70 is very different. I want to put up some poll numbers that just came out this morning about the president's approval rating. I know they claim they don't pay a lot of attention to this. Yeah. We, on days like this, of course, do. The approval rating among all adults, you see 45% approve, 54% disapprove, and there's been a much greater downward spiral among young Americans that for a long time were really the core, the giant base of support for the president in many ways right now. Also downward slides among independents. Give us a sense right now, as he sort of has 3.5 years left, but only a smaller window of time to really accomplish real change, like immigration, what the road looks like for this president.
I think Ruth brought up a great point. When you look at the president's second term, how does he define hope and change? How does he keep that 08 message moving forward? And I think Ruth is right. It's immigration reform, but he's dealing with a lot of complicated issues within the House Republican Conference. Boehner's looking really closely at the Senate. If this comes strong out of the Senate, 70-plus votes, Boehner's going to be under pressure to pass something, or at least bring it to the floor, give it a chance. But if only has 60 or 65 votes, Rubio maybe falls away, this is going to get very complicated. It may collapse.
Can I ask you about Joe Manchin really quickly? A headline coming out this morning. Joe Manchin, who is not up for re-election until 2018, you would think has plenty of time, has already launched his campaign. If there were any questions right now, he's producing an ad that's going to be shot today to counter the NRA ad going after him right now. We're learning that his chief of staff, Hayden Rogers, let his own NRA membership go lapse. Is this a personal battle? And where does the NRA versus Manchin fight, this whole issue, the gun control issue, go from here?
Well, it's going to be really interesting to see NRA versus Manchin. mention NRA versus Bloomberg, if there's any possibility for anything to happen. Senator Manchin, from a very gun-loving state, lifelong NRA member, but when you talk to him, you can tell he was deeply moved by the Newtown tragedy and is now very dug in, trying to get what I would think is a very reasonable piece of legislation passed. Was the president too slow to act in the days after Newtown?
Well, I mean, there's only so much he could do. I mean, I think he wanted to move faster. It was just not everyone wanted to move with him in the same direction.
After the Santa Monica shooting, people didn't even really revisit this issue again. There were 5 people killed on a college campus, frankly, in California. I want your take, Robert.
I think you've got to look at someone like Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. Some of these conservative Republicans who have moderate tendencies on background checks. Can they help Manchin to reignite this debate? That's the thing I'm watching as a reporter.
All right, you guys stick around for a second. Right now, trivia time for you at home. We asked who is the most recent president to not visit Northern Ireland. The answer, George H.W. Bush in 1995.